Okay, so starting off, I don't think this theory is real. It's just a fun observation of like a mix of things that I've noticed all connected to one thing. I love being the tinfoil hat guy, and nobody makes creepy pasta theories anymore, so of course it's got to be me that does it, because I'm living in that era. Also, trigger warning: there are mentions of death, gore, semi-graphic decomposition, and all that kind of stuff, because that's literally what this whole theory is based around. So basically, the theory is that Jeff finds a dead body in a bush at some point and leaves it without reporting it due to not wanting to
get involved.
He carries on, but later regrets not telling anyone about it. I just wanted to show some symbolism in the show that could link to that.
Bruh.
Also, FYI, he carries bush at some. So basically, the theory is that Jeff finds a dead body in a bush at some point and leaves it without reporting it due to not wanting to
get involved.
He carries on, but later regrets not telling anyone about it. I just wanted to show some symbolism in the show that could link to that.
Bruh.
Also, FYI, I don't do every episode. I mean, I haven't watched Clarence in over a year, so I only added episodes that I remembered had the imagery in it. If you guys watch this and find other things, then feel free to comment. I'd love to hear your guys' opinions on it. Also, I tried to write a script, and it's hard for me to read off it kind of, so if I sound kind of robotic, that's why. Anyways, to the actual theory, I'm going to start off first by mentioning Jeffrey Wendell, which is that rainstorm episode where the power goes out. Basically, that's where the whole theory started. Also, I actually got this idea from Clarence for President on TikTok, so give them a follow because they made this cool ass animation for it. Alright, so to start, Jeff Wins is the first episode I'm covering. In this episode, Jeff's doing a baking competition and he gets scared because he hates to lose. I really didn't think this episode would have a lie in it, theory-wise, but it does have a very important song lyric. When Clarence is singing to Jeff, "At least I'm not as uptight as you, Jeff," that song, he says,
"All I want to do is hide behind life's hedge, or lie down to decay."
And all I want to do is hide behind life's hedge, or lie down to decay. Jumping ahead here, but specifically, Jeff finds the body behind a bush, like a hedge. I'll show you a picture right now. And it was something bush, like a hedge. I'll show you a picture right now. And it was something that Jeff thought of in his own head, which felt completely out of nowhere without context. And the song was in Jeff's mind completely, like a disassociation. So I just thought it was ironic that he mentioned dying behind a bush.
Hello, Jeff. Is anyone home? Anyway, I'm just saying to loosen up, okay?
Alright, so moving on to the next episode, Worm Bin. In this episode, he's specifically terrified of worms. He's so scared that he stops eating, he stops sleeping, and he's willing to go insane lengths to get rid of them, so he can finally be at peace. P.S. Fuck his hippie-ass mom for not just throwing the worms out. Come on. He's literally not eating, sleeping, or drinking water, and you're fucking, oh, those are my worms. Anyways, there's a specific scene where he's finally getting rid of this burden. He finally gets that worms out of his house and he's free. And then he lies on the grass after getting rid of them, and the worms, they rise from the soil and they're kind of consuming him, just like he was scared that they would. Almost the same way worms consuming him, just like he was scared that they would. Almost the same way worms would eat away at a body, which is kind of gross, but it's true. He gets so horrified that he jumps up and starts screaming, stomping them out. Clarence convinced him that the worms aren't going to hurt him, and Jeff seems to be put at some ease. Coming to terms with them is neutral. Also, I want to mention, in the Tucker Boys, Worm Bin, and Jeffrey Wendell, they're all in the nighttime, and 2 of them are in the rain. Doesn't mean anything, it's just it's ironic that all the episodes I get these from are in the nighttime. Alright, so the next episode, and arguably the most important to me, is the Tucker Boys. The 3 boys kind of go on this acid trip. Sleep wouldn't cause that, come on, bro. And they decide to go outside and find a better place to watch the meteor shower. On their way, they go to a gas station and instantly start hallucinating. Jeff sees a man at the gas pump who's staring at him for, quite a while. And he kind of in a judgmental kind of way, he's just kind of, giving him the evil eye. And he's kind of looking at him like that for a while before Jeff finally decides to go to the bathroom. Upon entering the bathroom, there's this guy lying on the ground and he isn't moving or anything, like a corpse. And the body asks him for help, and Jeff's instantly triggered, turning around to run away and hitting his head on the pole, knocking him unconscious. He didn't even check if the guy was okay, he just instantly started running away, which was just weird. Another reason I think that this is an acid trip is because Jeff literally just slept. So how would he be tripping like that? Maybe he got brain damage or something, I don't know, from hitting his head. But I just think it's ironic that he slept and he still hallucinates. Arguably the most. He hallucinates almost the most out of all three of them. Anyways, I personally think this episode is supposed to show all three of their inner fears through the hallucinations. Clarence is scared of existentialism, Sumo's scared of his violent side and his need to release his frustration through that violence. And what about Jeff? Well, when Jeff wakes up from his coma, he peed himself and is confused on where they are. They all bicker and the three separate after Jeff sees Copernicus. I'm just going to say Copernicus. If that's wrong, just correct me. And he sees Copernicus behind a bush, beckoning him to follow him. Ironically, this bush is nearly identical in the setup to the one in Jeffrey Wendell where he found the body. Also, I added a filter to make the colors look the same. Like, if you can see my vision, I got like a drawing here for you guys. It's almost identical, like the setup wise. There's just that little space in the middle. And I think this is supposed to represent his guilt with it. He associates Copernicus with the identity of the victim he found in the bush, and this trip in general is just him subconsciously trying to forgive himself for what he did and trying to validate it. What he did it being leaving the body just without reporting it. Especially because it's a secret he's hiding and Copernicus shushes him before asking him to follow. Anyways, they go on this adventure and spend a good time together, a pretty good trip. And Copernicus praises Jeff for doing everything right this far and gives him the chance to find
My missing constellation!
to find me. Right, this far and gives him the chance to find
My missing constellation!
to find me. Kind of like a reference to the body still being missing and prompting Jeff to go back and try to find it. Then Clarence comes in and Jeff looks almost like he'd been caught doing something. He gets pissed off at Clarence for intruding on his vision and making him lose track of Copernicus again. He then ends up leaving and finds Copernicus deeper in the woods. Copernicus gives Jeff his hair in a graphic way that's kind of disgusting considering the context. You know, like decomposing body, hair falling out, like it's just gross. But anyways, before Jeff can take it, he's interrupted again by Clarence. Copernicus is disappointed and sinks into the dirt, making Jeff dig desperately to try and get him back. Something Jeff would not do. Because he's a clean freak. He's got, I think it's mysophobia or whatever. And of course, bodies are usually found under dirt. I just thought that was ironic. At the end of the day, they call it quits and they go and get some well-needed rest after witnessing the meteor shower, possibly coming to terms with everything. Also, another thing to bring up, I know it's the lighting, but Copernicus is kind of like this blue color, like a corpse. The lighting in the picture made him look completely different in the one, like the magazine he had. But his hair color specifically, too, is completely different than it is in the book, and that's not a lighting thing. Alright, and the last episode I wanted to bring up is the one that started everything. The reason I even had this theory to begin with, which is Jeffrey Wendell. Basically, the power goes out because Jeff gets his kite stuck in a power line, and Clarence is also missing because he went out to get Jeff, like, this raisin drink or whatever. And Jeff blames himself for sending Clarence out, pretty much. So he stays at Chad and Mary's place while trying to hide the fact that he caused the power outage and caused Clarence to go missing. He ends up telling Chad and Mary a story during this time. He was walking to school, and I'm calling bullshit because he takes the bus as shown multiple times. And he noticed his sandal was unbuckled, so he bends down to fix it and he notices a trail of red liquid coming from a bush. He stares at it while he monologues in the back about how he's glad he was
lucky enough not to get involved.
or step in the liquid. Also, FYI, I know he mentions it happened this week, but again, you can't trust his story. His reaction was more scared in the flashback visual, where his explanation of it all made him seem more nonchalant. Also, I want to mention the amount of flies in the bush. Like, it was definitely a body. Even if this theory ain't true, he definitely saw a dead body. Chad even asks if it was guts or something, and Jeff shrugs it off instantly. Then after this point in the episode, Jeff is more catatonic and, like, stressed out. He starts doing things he normally wouldn't, like drinking dirty milk and trying to play games with Chad and Mary, etc. Then they finally go to look for Clarence, and Jeff mentions that the news gives him anxiety, which would make sense if he didn't want to hear about the discovery of any bodies in town. It might make him feel guilty. Last off mention, in the Flood Brothers episode, Percy finds this, like, blue rotten hand. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not saying it has anything to do with it. I'm just throwing it out there. So my thoughts now, this is all headcanon past this point, but I just wanted to get into the logistics of everything before I call it quits. I've never made a video like this, so might as well just ramble at the end here. I think something like this would really bother Jeff. He's an uptight kid who likes to follow rules and behave. Him finding a corpse would probably scare him and make him think he'd get in trouble or something. So he leaves it. I feel like he'd probably take the secret to his grave if he had to, and maybe the imagery of Copernicus is easier to
Incest. Incest, slavery, lollies, traps, oversized breasts, fan service, harems, domestic abuse. All of these tropes are, individually, at the very least, annoying. At worst, socially damning. Yet, collectively, these tropes are part of what makes anime anime. For better or for worse. You know, I'm starting to think that this isn't actually a very good argument. But anime is full of stupid shit like this. And people are always complaining about it.
Always has been, always will be.
And trust me, I understand why. But if you were to just relax a little bit, maybe throw your hands up in the air like you just don't care, then you would get to experience cool shit like this. Oh my.
It should have been me!
I was reincarnated as a seventh princess so I can take my time perfecting my man. Dude, can they make the title any fucking longer?
Yes!
My life is just as expensive as oh God. Oh. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take me back. Take me back. Take me back. Take me back. Take me back! The seventh princess is an isekai. About an insane person who is magisexual. Just like how Mao Mao is psychotically obsessed with poison, this chick is psychotically obsessed with magic. In fact, in their past life, they are getting immolated alive by powerful magic, of course, and they're just sitting there like... So they die in that raging inferno, and then they get reincarnated as the seventh princess so she can take her time perfecting her magical ability. No, by the way, this is not isekai, although a lot of people seem to be convinced that it is. Similar tropes and all that jazz, I get it. But the word isekai literally translates to different world. And here, our MC is reincarnated into the same world. So, like, technically speaking, it's pretty much the opposite of an isekai. But the seventh princess still sounds like generic fantasy anime trash. Because it is, in the same way that Jujutsu Kaisen and Demon Slayer are generic battle shonen. The production and characters in these series are just so good that they end up being more than that. Much more. Okay, let's talk about the elephants in the room. The two voluptuous, rosy, overly detailed elephants. I just don't see why people are upset about the MC's legs. If it makes you angry, just follow my lead and take a deep breath. Inhale and exhale. Okay, awesome.
Good job.
Now, does this character design affect any real person in any way? No, it doesn't. So why do people care? Lloyd? Oh. Oh, that's a dude. Lloyd? Exhale. Isekai? But the seventh princess still sounds like generic fantasy anime tropes. The op get reincarnated as the seventh princess so she can take her time perfecting her magical ability. No, by the way, this is not isekai, although a lot of people seem to be convinced that it is. Similar tropes and all that jazz, I get it. But the word isekai literally translates to different world. And here, our MC is reincarnated into the same world. So, like, technically speaking, it's pretty much the opposite of an isekai. But the Seventh Princess still sounds like generic fantasy anime trash. Because it is, in the same way that Jujutsu Kaisen and Demon Slayer are generic battle shonen. The production and characters in these series are just so good that they end up being more than that. Much more. Okay, let's talk about the elephants in the room. The two voluptuous rose. Okay, let's talk about than that. Much more. Okay, let's talk about the elephants in the room. The two voluptuous, rosy, overly detailed elephants. I just don't see why people are upset about the MC's legs. If it makes you angry, just follow my lead and take a deep breath. Inhale and exhale. Okay, awesome.
Good job.
Now, does this character design affect any real person in any way? No, it doesn't. So why do people care? Lloyd? Oh. Oh, that's a dude. Well, I ain't no
Cringe ass homophobia and
I'm joking, it's a joke. Yeah, dude. I would totally smack. Oh. Well, that's not good. Joke. Yeah, dude. I would totally smack. Oh. Well, that's not good. These overly sexualized hips and thighs belong to a 10-year-old boy. The problem is not that he's a femboy. The problem is that he's 10. Although I guess mentally he's like in his 30s or something. But that's just it. This is just a fictional character with weirdly nice legs. Legs that in no universe would ever belong to a 10-year-old boy. If you really wanted to, you could probably even count these as two separate entities. It's just dumb anime shit that doesn't hurt anybody. I was uncomfortable at first, but then just like with everything else in life, I just kind of stopped caring over time. But, there is absolutely no redeeming factor that justifies Lloyd's thighs. This isn't like Mushoku Tensei, Onimai, Monogatari, or even Araimo, where this garbage is used as a plot device. And there's actually a good message attached. No, this is smut for smut's sake. And for that reason, this is smut for smut's sake. And for that reason, I can't actually really recommend watching The Seventh Prince. No, this is smut for smut's sake. And for that reason, I can't actually really recommend watching The Seventh Prince. But here's my pitch anyway. The Seventh Prince knows exactly what it is, and it's better for it. It's not ashamed of itself, and plays into anime's stupidest tropes. If we were to say that Frieren breaks the rules of anime to transcend the medium, this would be the opposite side of that coin. The production. Holy shit, the production. I expected pretty much nothing going into this, but the Seventh Prince's production is the best that I've seen since, Frieren, I guess. And when we're talking about production here, we are not just talking about the budget or the number of frames animated. We're talking about the pacing, the timing, the voice acting, sound design, art, music, overall direction, the whole shebang. Production is not just about money and time, but about how you use that money and time as well. And The Seventh Prince is a masterclass in that aspect. I read the manga up to chapter 50, and it's probably the best art I've seen in any manga that I have ever read, personally at least. This is modern art, and this no-name production studio is doing their damnedest to replicate that feeling. There are so many scenes that are just approached with such creativity, and you gotta love to see it. There's kind of been this growing trend of animators really breaking the mold and thinking outside the box, which if you couldn't tell by the way I edit, I kinda dig that shit. The Seventh Prince is just a fun show, and it really does seem like the people working on it are legitimately having fun doing so. Mappa's animators are crying right now. Fun. This anime is just fun, which I actually wrote a little song about it. It goes like this. F is for fights that look really awesome. U is for you and me. R degenerates. N is for everyone and anyone at all. Can be drawn to have really plump thighs that make me question my morality. Hear me out. This is what separates anime from modern Hollywood and Western. I have really plump thighs that make me question my morality. Hear me out. This is what separates anime from modern Hollywood and Western media. The writers for anime and manga truly do not fear social backlash for whatever they make, and they genuinely write whatever the fuck they want. And because their creativity isn't stifled, they can legitimately have fun and express themselves in their work, which is how you make good art, through passion, no matter how fucked up it is. Because of this unparalleled freedom of expression, we get masterpieces like Mushoku Tensei or Made in Abyss. Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan has an incest subplot between the main characters.
Oh, but they're not related by blood!
Dude, that is the exact trope. Yes, even Attack on Titan is not safe from anime degeneracy. Look, you don't have to agree with me. You don't even have to accept all of anime's trashy tropes. Just before you get upset about something and try to attack people for liking it or making it, first just take a step back, take a deep breath, and remember that it doesn't fucking matter. Our AI overlords will soon dominate the Earth regardless. I just enjoy exploring the nuances of controversial anime. But somewhere along the way, the Seventh Prince stole my heart. I don't mean it like that. I don't mean it like that, guys. Guys? You know I don't mean it like that, right? Thank you too. Jitney John, Dominic Majowski, Brothers Gaming, Next Intellijar, Valentin Mayorga, My Butthole, Mansoor Peas, Horizon Cat, Luke B. Olsen, Ducky, Ollie, Rocky Peppermint Beat, Bad Fuck, Lasagna Soda, Fenestrelli. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting me. And I'll see you all in the next
This video is brought to you by War Thunder.
What did you see, Doc?
You don't want to know.
Good evening. There's not very many games that have had as huge of an effect on internet culture as Team Fortress 2. Growing up on the internet in the 2010s, it was damn near impossible to not at some point stumble across some kind of TF2 meme video or animation. Whether it was the official animated shorts that went viral year after year and defined the game's characters in the hearts of millions, or its fan animations made in Gary's Modern Source Filmmaker that usually fell somewhere on a spectrum between beautiful work of art and laughably nonsensical stories starring some of the stupidest characters that the internet has ever seen, so long as you were active online, it was almost guaranteed that at some point you were going to see something TF2 related. The game was a walking meme and inside joke machine, kept alive by countless creators and animators making a wide range of new stories come to life in the TF2 world year after year after year. One of my personal favorite phenomena were the TF2 freaks. Some animators simply weren't happy with how normal the TF2 cast were, and decided to distort them into demented fan-made creatures with weird appearances, weird voices, and even weirder behavior. They would twist and contort in strange ways, and say nonsensical phrases before sputtering away, and leave you wondering what in the hell you were even watching.
I am pain is cupcake. I will eat you.
However, as a culture slowly grew surrounding these TF2 freaks, we started seeing something really weird form. A lot of these videos were clearly intended to be funny, but it's impossible to ignore how many of them also had an unsettling edge. Now that's not to say they were scary, most of the freaks you'd see were far too ridiculous looking to ever be that. But the sight of these familiar locations subverted with weird creatures slithering around, doing abrupt violent attacks and repeating stilted edited voice lines sometimes left the viewer feeling a little awkward. No doubt part of what made these videos work was just how wrong they felt. TF2 had some spooky stuff in it, sure, but it was a comical game at heart, and the game's official Halloween events largely consisted of tame and goofy Monster Mash content like purple ghosts and hats and paper bag masks. The TF2 freaks, meanwhile, introduced us to Lovecraftian monsters like the Vagineer, who would suck innocent people into his giant, suspiciously shaped mouth, or Christian Brutal Sniper, a psychopathic killer who would brutally chop anyone who got in his way into bits with a quiet smile. The tone of these characters was completely different to those seen in the actual game, yet all of this off-kilter activity was usually juxtaposed with the same pastel colors and jolly quaint backing tracks seen in other more innocent TF2 Gmod videos of the time. And while the eeriness of it was usually short-lived, if you came across one of them before bed on a school night, some of these videos could leave you feeling a little weirded out, make you scramble for a more normal video to cleanse your palate. However, amidst all the strange TF2 movies that I gladly let rot my brain as a child, there was only one I came across that I remember leaving an actual lasting, chilling impression on me. It was a series from 2012 simply called Team Killer. Team Killer introduced an antagonist of the same name, a serial killer psychopath akin to the likes of Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger, who would violently terrorize and torture the helpless cast members of TF2, not dissimilar to how a sniper with 10,000 hours does in the actual game. What made Team Killer unique from the other TF2 freaks, however, was that he went beyond simply unnerving the viewer. Team Killer delved into a kind of visceral, blood-soaked horror reminiscent of films like Saw, pushing TF2's world and its characters to their most gruesome limits in tellings of these dark, bloody, horrific nighttime massacres, violently impaling and slashing our familiar beloved characters to pieces, sending helpless unarmed bystanders running and screaming for help just to get slaughtered anyway. As a kid, these short movies terrified me, but I also couldn't look away from them, like a car crash in slow motion. Looking back today, most of these Team Killer videos were basically choppy Gmod slideshows and relied mainly on sound effects and music. And the Team Killer's backstory and motivations didn't make a whole lot of sense either. But for what they were, these videos made for pretty compelling spooky media for a young child. And more importantly, Team Killer showed that, despite Team Fortress 2's comical nature, there was great promise in the idea of, and a genuine audience for, a horror movie set in the TF2 universe. For anyone who hasn't been living under a rock for the last year or so, you can probably tell where this is going. It's been a little over a year since a YouTube video called Emis is Blue took the TF2 community and the greater internet by storm. It entranced the masses in a bloody horror show not too different from those seen in those old Team Killer videos I used to watch, but did so in the format of an actual feature-length film with a professional level of polish, reveling in a dark and twisted story for a near 2-hour runtime. Emis is Blue is not only one of the most technically impressive things to ever come out of the TF2 community, but it's a film that stands on its own as a viral phenomenon that made a huge sect of the internet view this beloved game from a completely new perspective, while also sickening them to their core with its crazy body horror and stomach-sinking brutality. It's pretty much the magnum opus of TF2 horror, and it's also a loving homage to the horror genre in general, featuring countless references to scary films, TV shows, and games you might recognize as you watch. On release, Emis is Blue's reception was incredible, but thanks to its abstract and non-linear storytelling, pretty much no one seemed to fully understand it on a first watch. And the top comments on the video showed just how much it bewildered TF2 fans on release. The film has already been covered by a few other creators, and some would say I'm a little late to the party to be making a video on it, but to many in the community, the film's story still remains incredibly hazy even to this day. And there's also a whole lot that's been left unsaid and unsolved even after a year's worth of analyses. On top of that, there's a lot that's happened in the world of its creators, Fortress Films, in the year since its release that, in my opinion, make the film and its story worth analyzing in greater detail. They've released a lot of statements and exclusive content that massively recontextualizes some parts of the movie, and with the recent anniversary and announcement of an apparent sequel on the way, I figured what better time than now to revisit this masterpiece and see if we can finally take a good crack at understanding Emis is Blue. In this video, I'm going to try to bring as much clarity to this film as possible. I'm going to attempt to genuinely understand its themes and character arcs, what its story implies about the TF2 universe, what the film's actual plot is beneath all its surreal imagery, and most importantly, what the fuck an Emis is Blue is.
You've just crossed into a realm where life and death are mere playthings. A dimension where the respawn of man is both a blessing and a curse. Out in the bone-dry Badlands, a malfunctioning contraption known as the respawn machine has turned the gift of life into a grotesque nightmare. Welcome to the Conagra Slaughterhouse, nestled deep within the forsaken lands of Mortem, New Mexico. It's here where a spectral figure emerges from the depths of a junkie doctor's fractured mind. Next stop, the respawn point of your nightmares.
Before we continue though, I gotta tell you about the amazing sponsor of this video, War Thunder. War Thunder is its soul's subscription. New and returning players who haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms that includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account. It's available for a limited time only, so make sure to be quick. Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video, but now let's get back to business.
Emis is Blue is made by Fortress Films, an Australian indie film team led by two guys named Chad Payne and Anton Pellizzari, and is by far their most crowning achievement. However, it's not where they got their start. The Fortress Films YouTube channel was technically started in 2014, responsible for pumping out a few simplistic and short SFMs before going into hibernation to work on much bigger things. Their earliest publicly available upload came on August 7th, 2018, in the form of a 28-minute long SFM animation called Spy's Disguise. This might seem like a silly and lighthearted video at first, and it is for the most part, but Spy's Disguise actually sowed the early seeds for Emis is Blue, and is in fact set in the same cinematic universe. You don't need to see either movie to enjoy the other, but the context does make some scenes in Emis is Blue make more sense, so it's worth touching on that film a little bit before we get to the main course. The story of Spy's Disguise follows a disgruntled blue spy named SO9, who is massively unsuccessful in helping his team gain any ground in a match of Dust Bowl, but finally gets a lucky break when he accidentally upgrades his disguise kit, allowing him to disguise as and inherit the abilities of engineers' buildings. He uses this newfound unfair advantage to easily
dominate his enemies, killing them in new, unheard of, unexpected, and often comical ways. In a fit of frustration, the enemy Red Engineer, named Del, heads underground and destroys a piece of technology called the Respawn Machine. As I'm sure many of you know, this Respawn Machine technology later becomes a focal point in Emesis Blue. In Spy's Disguise, however, its destruction just sets the plot up so whoever loses the showdown between Del and SO9 can't come back from the dead anymore. Their deaths are now permanent. Del heads to Badwater after receiving a taunting note, and most of his team gets wiped out by SO9 and his sidekick Blue Engineer. However, Del turns out to have an ace in the hole in the form of a goddamn mech suit. One of the things that's a little off-putting about Spy's Disguise is that it has much harsher gore than you'd probably expect from a goofy SFM TF2 animation. Guts spill out of mercenaries in jarringly visceral ways. And also, Uncle Dane gets fucking owned. Mercenaries in jarringly visceral ways. And also, Uncle Dane gets fucking owned. Anyway, SO9... ultimately wins, killing Del forever. However, in the last 5 minutes of its runtime, Spy's Disguise basically becomes a completely different movie. It takes a massive turn for the surreal, showing some kind of elaborate dream sequence of SO9 confronting his mechanical self, almost as if he's lost his sense of identity and become more machine than man. He wakes up hospitalized in the care of a blue medic donning a cross necklace, and sees hallucinations of his dead arch-nemesis Del everywhere he looks. It seems his sentry gun augmentations have cost him his sanity. The film finally closes with SO9 getting visited by his old engineer friend, before getting strapped into an ambulance by the medic and hauled away, visions of Del still haunting him. It's a really jarring ending for what had up until that point been a pretty run-of-the-mill TF2 animation. After the release of Spy's Disguise, Fortress Films immediately went full steam ahead on production of Emesis Blue. And after 5 years and a few analog horror-inspired teasers, it finally arrived on February 20th, 2023. The full, nearly 2-hour-long movie was posted for free to the Fortress Films YouTube channel, with a vague description reading,
"On Halloween night of 1968, an executive of the Builders League United Corporation mysteriously vanishes in Morton, New Mexico. A private detective and washed-up war veteran team up to find him, yet the man they hunt is more dangerous than they can possibly imagine."
So with all that context out of the way, why don't we finally take a look at Emesis Blue itself? To start us off, it'll save us a lot of headache if I give you a rundown of the film's star players now, instead of introducing them as they come. There's a number of characters that appear in Emesis Blue, but there's only a few that the plot seems to really revolve around. And for ease of explanation, I've split them into duos. First is Medic and Scout. In this film, the Christian Medic from Spy's Disguise returns as our main protagonist. He takes on his regular TF2 canon name, Dr. Ludwig, but also takes on a newly established first name, Fritz, a reference to Fritz Lang, a German director responsible for a German film from 1931 called M, which was a
major source of inspiration for and also makes a direct appearance in Emesis Blue. Fritz is incredibly neurotic. His medical profession and the PTSD-inducing horrors he's witnessed are played very seriously, and his portrayal actually reminded me of Valve's official Meet the Medic outtakes that showed an extremely anxious medic dealing with the harsh realities of battlefield medicine.
I'd almost given up. It had been my darkest moment.
The Scout, meanwhile, is a young man named Jeremy, his last initial specified as E. This is a reference to Germa 985, whose name on Google is listed as Jeremy Elbertson, and who some say was the inspiration for Scout being named Jeremy in actual TF2 canon. Jeremy's innocence and youth is basically the focal point of his character, with others in the film often referring to him as a boy and his relationship with his mother being stressed quite a lot. He even wears a hat that looks like something straight out of a child's wardrobe. Anyway, Fritz and Jeremy are two friends who have clearly known each other for a long time, as the medic's office is decorated with framed pictures of the two. However, there's a clear driving wedge between them. Jeremy is timid and paranoid, constantly seeking answers and seeming lost. Fritz, meanwhile, seems to know too much, and appears to be actively holding back some kind of information from Jeremy that casts an ominous cloud over many of their interactions. You'll see what I mean as soon as the film starts. The second duo, or I guess trio, is Jules Archibald and the Mann brothers. The Mann brothers, Redman Man and Blutarch Man, are background characters in actual TF2 canon. They're biological brothers and respective owners of the Red and Blue companies fighting over land in New Mexico, locked in a bitter blood feud over ownership of property their late father bestowed them in as well. They make an appearance in the flesh toward the end of the film's runtime and have a pretty decent bearing on its grander plot. They also both use these strange high-poly models that appear to be based on the G-Man from Half-Life Alyx, giving them a very uncanny, wrinkly appearance. Then there's a brand new original character, Jules Archibald. Jules takes on the likeness and mannerisms of the civilian character seen in the mod Team Fortress 2 Classic, though in this film he's instead portrayed as a part of Blue's leadership and a pivotal player in the war between Red and Blue. Jules is also said to be the governor of New Mexico and is coming up for re-election soon at the time of the film, hence the billboards we see of him at various scenes. He's the missing Blue Team executive that the film's description speaks of, and a good amount of the movie revolves around him and his disappearance. And finally, there's Soldier and Spy. These are two collaborative agents and hired guns for Blue Team, and by extension Archibald, and they're the ones in charge of tracking him down now that he's vanished. In this movie, Soldier is shown to be more righteous and intelligent than most people would expect of his character, and actually might be the most reliable narrator in the entire movie, though he still has some derp-ass moments. And last but not least, there's the Spy, given the name Jacques Morneau, who is shown to be particularly pretentious and bitter. His extreme arrogance lives up to French stereotypes, and in fact, most of the mistakes the duo make are pretty much entirely his fault. I found him to be a bit unlikable, to be honest. Have you picked your favorites and least favorites yet? Figured out who you're rooting for? Nah, who am I kidding? Pretty much every single one of these characters are in for a hellish nightmare from the word go, so don't get too attached. With that out of the way though, let's get to the prologue, and more importantly, the respawn machine. The opening shot of Emesis Blue reintroduces the respawn machine technology we saw in Spy's Disguise, though this time it's shown in a much more sinister light. We're informed that it's manufactured by a company called Helix Technologies, then shown the increasingly terrifying aftermath of 4 different men who were put through the machine. The first one comes out relatively normal from the looks of his silhouette, but he yells, "It's eternity in there," before collapsing to his knees. The second subject comes out and says, "My eyes hurt." Then we get a quick shot showing that he seems to be bleeding from his eyes, mouth, and nose. The third subject comes out completely silent, just writhing and twitching ominously. And then finally, the fourth subject splatters the window frame and door of the machine with blood, before what seems to be a sensor bar blocks the left window. Lord knows what happened to that guy. The respawn machine in this movie attempts to fill in somewhat of a plot hole in the TF2 universe. The fact that there are seemingly infinite clones of the same 9 mercenaries, somehow simultaneously fighting for both teams. This could be explained much more simply in the game's earlier days, where it could be said that the mercenaries weren't literal people, but instead metaphoric archetypes for the soldiers in the Red vs. Blue War. However, it seems that the Gmod community's portrayal of the mercenaries as real people rubbed off on Valve early on, as the comics came to establish them as individual humans with social security numbers, and Miss Pauling even tells stories over the contractor about going grocery shopping with Spy TF2. According to Anton Pelazari, the film's producer, Emesis Blue is meant to portray a more grounded take on the Red vs. Blue conflict from TF2, with the main difference being that while TF2 casually ignores questions about these things, Emesis Blue takes the premise of these mercenary clone armies deathly seriously. It's a world where not all mercenaries are necessarily boots on the ground infantry either. There's non-combatant pencil-pushing mercs as well. For example, the medic character Fritz is said to be a particularly important clone who's in charge of the Blue Team's entire hospital. So we can assume he hasn't seen the battlefield much and is in more of an administrative position. And of course, the film goes as far as to introduce the idea of a respawn technology to explain why these mercenaries just keep coming back to life. It's important to note that, according to Anton, this respawning process isn't the same as being cloned. In the case of cloning, you'd be making more than one instance of the same person. With respawning, the mercenaries are literally just being brought back to life and reforged through the machine, which is apparently a lot more cost-effective than biologically reproducing them. That being said, cloning technology does exist in the Emesis Blue universe, and many of the characters we see in the film are still clones. It's a bit confusing, but it all comes together to ask some really freaky questions about these mercenary psychologies and senses of identity. And it's a really interesting take on the world, in my opinion. Anton has also confirmed that this two-fort respawn machine we see here is nowhere near the only respawn machine in the Emesis Blue universe, which makes sense given the appearance that one made back in Spy's Disguise. However, it is apparently the only respawn machine that malfunctions in the way this prologue shows us. The others, we can assume, work just fine. It's just that, much like an actual TF2, those in the Emesis Blue universe lining up for 2-Fort are in for a uniquely torturous experience. Sorry for the long-windedness there, but while the respawn machine is one of the most pivotal elements of the entire film, it's also a bit complex and confusing, especially if you've only seen the movie once or twice and haven't